Musical musings, musical musings, musical musings, musical musings.
Hello and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to our latest episode of Musical Musings. We air every Wednesday at 1 p.m., and we bring this program to you from Ratchamakan, University of Technology, Peranakan. It'll come to you in two parts. In our first part, I will introduce a song to you, as well as the group or the band or the performer who sings the song. So we'll talk a little bit about them, just so you have some background about the performer and the song. Then we will listen to the song, and in the second half of the program, we will go through the lyrics of the song. Those are the words. Lyrics mean the word to the songs. We will go through the words of the song and talk about anything that might be a little bit difficult to understand. Any slang, difficult vocabulary, things like that. All right, and then after that, we will get to our news and the updates from the university as usual.
Musical musings, musical musings, musical musings, musical musings.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Gary Gray, and I am your host here for our Musical Musings program. I'm an American teacher here at Ratchamakan University of Technology, Peranakan, and I have been here for almost 7 years. Of course, I teach English. I also teach a little bit of science, and I enjoy music. And so that's what we're going to do for this program. We are going to talk about music. So for today's episode, we are going to do a very interesting song. The name of the song is Lola by the Kinks. I'm not going to tell you too much about the song in the first half of this program. I usually kind of give you the background of the song, what it's about, give you some information about it. I'm not going to give you too much information because it's quite different. I want you to listen to the song and see if you can figure it out. It is especially quite different because it's from 1970. So we're almost all the way back into the 1960s even. Not quite. It's 1970. So you know how society changes with time. This song, I think most of you right now will find maybe a little weird, maybe a little funny, maybe a little cool because it's very, up to date, progressive, modern. Yeah, and it was made in 1970, over 50 years ago. So imagine how crazy this song was then when it came out. In fact, I think a lot of people didn't even understand the song. It just has nice music to it, and we just listen to it, okay. Yep, that's how I was growing up. I didn't know what it was about. I didn't listen to the words very much. It's kind of a cool song. I like the music. Yes, the words are very interesting. So again, I'm not going to tell you too much about it in the first half. I want you to listen to it, and we'll talk about it in the second half. Okay, so we're not going to talk too much about the song. I'll give you a little information, but not too much. But we're going to first talk about the band. The name of the band is the Kinks. So they were formed in 1963. It was two, I believe they were brothers, Ray and Dave Davies. I should have taken that note down. I'm not sure that they were brothers. I think they were. Same last name. And they formed a band together. So probably brothers, but they could have been cousins. I don't know. I didn't write that note down. So Ray and Dave Davies, who I think, like I said, were probably brothers, they formed this band in 1963 in London. That's where they are from. They're a British band. One of the things I kind of talk about sometimes on here is like the accents and the way people sing. Most of the times, most performers throughout the world will try to sing their songs with an American accent, and you'll hear that here. You're not really going to hear a strong British accent with this song. There are a couple of words they use. I have the lyrics sitting here in front of me. That's why I'm looking down. There are a couple of words they use that are related to Britain or London. Like it says at one point, right in the very first line, I met her in a club down in Old Soho. Okay, so Soho does have a meaning in American English. If you're thinking of New York City, Soho stands for South of Houston Street. Soho, South Houston, south of Houston Street. So that's what it stands for in America. That's not what it stands for in London. But it is an area of London, so that's a London reference there. So we do have a little bit of that here. A little bit of things related to England, London, whatever. But mostly when you hear the song, it's going to sound like they're singing in American English. That's something that, honestly, even I don't understand why they do that. I can only guess that it's because America is the largest English-speaking country. So if you want to become popular, as most of these bands do, it's best not to sing with a British or Australian or Irish accent. You'll certainly hear some bands do it. Even probably the most famous band of all time, the Beatles. If you listen to them sing, it's kind of halfway in between. It's not really a strong British accent, but you will hear a little bit of it in there. So they don't totally get rid of their British accent when you listen to the Beatles sing. So they won't all do that, but most of the time. For example, the Bee Gees are pretty popular here in Thailand. They're Australian. They were actually, technically, they're British. They were born in Britain, but they moved to Australia when they were very young. So they're thought of as an Australian band. And when they sing, it is mostly sounding like American English. So that's what most of these bands try to do. And you'll hear that here with the Kinks. It's just going to sound, well, to me, because I am American, it's going to sound normal. I mean, it may not sound normal for someone from Britain or Australia unless they're used to it, since most bands do this. So they might be used to it. But some of them might not think it sounds normal. Like, why does a British band sound like this? But for an American, to me, it just sounds normal. Okay, so again, this is the Kinks. They formed in 1963 in London, England. Ray and Dave Davies formed the band. And one more thing that's good to know about the band is that they were part of what's called the British Invasion. What does that mean? Invasion? That's usually talking about war, people attacking. No, it's not about war. It's just about the spread of British music. There was this period in Britain where there was this just giant movement around music. Different kinds of music, developing the music scene, and all these people want to become singers and want to join bands and everything like that. So there's all kinds of bands forming in Britain. Of course, not all of them were good, but just by a matter of chance, the more you have, the more there are that are going to be good. So there were a lot of great bands that came out of Britain. And so the British invasion is a reference to America, where all of these British bands came to America. Bands like the Beatles, they were the ones that really started it. They were the first ones. So the Beatles, number one. They were number one for the British invasion. And you had other big bands like the Rolling Stones, the Who. Those were some pretty big British bands that came to America during the British invasion. And the Kinks were one of them. They were a little bit less popular. They did have some pretty big songs. They were popular. I've heard of them since I was young. And I was born after the British invasion, and I've still heard of them. So, yeah, they were quite popular. But just a little bit less popular than bands like The Who or the Rolling Stones or the Beatles. And there were many more. There were many more. That's why it was called the British invasion. There were lots of them. Lots of bands came over. Okay, so the Kinks. That's the name of the band. The name of the song is Lola. I said I'm going to keep the first part of this program short. We've already gone on for about 10 minutes. We're just going to get right to this song. I don't want to discuss too much what it's about. I want you to listen to it first because it's quite interesting. You might think it's a little funny. I think the people that were singing it, the band members of the Kinks, when you watch the video, if you're able to watch the video, some of you may be just listening, but if you watch the video, you'll see they're kind of smiling. It's a live version of the program, of the song. You'll see they're in a. It's also a very serious song. When you think about how the song ends and what it talks about, it's quite serious and it's quite progressive. What I mean by progressive is modern. There were things that were not very acceptable back then, which are more acceptable now. And so this was talking about being acceptable towards those things. It's not exactly about like people being gay. I mean, it's related to that, but it's not really. Again, I don't want to give away too much. I want you to listen to the song. But it's related to that. And I know here in Thailand, I don't think it's always been more acceptable. It was pretty conservative, like many decades ago. But I think you don't have the same religious issues around it as we do in America. So I think it was probably always a little more acceptable, even if it wasn't very acceptable. So keep in mind, we're talking about an American audience here. In 1970, so we're almost back into the 1960s, this was very unacceptable for most Americans. And yet the song became very popular. Like I said, I think a lot of people just didn't listen to the words. I didn't. It's just a good song. I like the song. The music's good. So that's why I say it's kind of it's funny song, but at the same time, it's also kind of very serious in that way because it's trying to say that what they're talking about, again, I don't want to give away too much. I want you to hear the song first. But it's trying to say that that they're talking about, it's okay. It's okay. The person singing the song, we don't know if it's actually his experience. I think from what I've heard about this song, he actually did have an experience similar to this. So this is his own experience. And you'll see as we go through the song, he's like, okay, yeah. It is what it is. It's okay. Not a big deal. All right, so let's get on to the song. For those of you that are joining us via YouTube, if you've watched this show before, you know that copyright issues mean that we cannot embed this video in YouTube. Actually, I think we probably could if we minimized it or something, made it small. But we try not to take those chances. We don't want to run into any copyright issues. So we're going to give you a link in the upper right-hand side, so you can click on that link to jump to the video, and then you can just jump back to us when it's over. And for those of you listening on streaming or the actual radio, you should be okay. We're just going to play the audio from the song, so no problem. You should have no problem listening in. All right, so let's get to the song. Here you go. It's Lola by the Kinks.
Musical musings, musical musings, musical musings, musical musings.
Welcome back, everyone. All right, so now that you've heard that song, you might understand that it's about kind of discovering yourself or accepting others, maybe. Either one. Could be both. Okay, so let's go through the lyrics. Let's go through the words to the song. So we start out. I met her in a club down in old Soho. All right, I already mentioned to you before that Soho is just an area around London. So a club is the same as a bar. So I met her in a bar somewhere in London. Met her in a club down in old Soho, where you drink champagne and it tastes just like Coca-Cola. C-O-L-A cola. And I think in this video, they say it tastes just like cherry cola. They sometimes change the lyrics to this when they sing it. But it says cherry cola, I think, in the video you heard. All right, so cherry cola, we're talking about Coca-Cola. It comes in a cherry flavor. I don't know if they even have that here, so you might not be familiar with that. But yeah, we have that flavor in America. We have cherry flavor to Coke. That's all they're saying. So where you drink champagne, but the champagne tastes like cherry cola. Okay, what would that even mean? That probably means it's kind of a cheap bar. I don't want to say low class, but for lack of any better word, probably a low class bar. Because champagne is like a high-class drink. Your champagne shouldn't taste like Coke. No, that's not good. That is not good champagne. So we're probably talking about a low-class bar. So we're talking about a place where, not people that aren't wealthy, just kind of ordinary people. I think maybe a lot of people that listen to this might actually be students. It might be a place that students would go. I live in Pinkau here in Bangkok, and I see on Facebook a lot of my students go to the Pha bar. It would be probably something like that. I mean, Pha is certainly not low class. They have music there. It's a nice bar. But, it's not so expensive. It's not so outrageous. So it's probably something like that. Maybe even a little bit below that, maybe one step below that, but similar to that. Okay, we continue on. She walked up to me and she asked me to dance. I asked her her name and a dark brown voice. She said, Lola. Okay, so here we have our first weird thing. And I will be honest with you, even native English speakers don't really understand this. It doesn't make any sense. So it says she walked up to me. She asked me to dance. Okay, that's fine. She walked up to me, asked me to dance. I asked her her name. Okay, fine. In a dark brown voice, she said Lola. Okay, Lola is just her name, so that's fine. But what does it mean in a dark brown voice? What does that mean? Okay, so what we think that means, based on the whole rest of the story and where we're going here, we kind of associate brown or black with kind of dark colors. So a dark brown voice is going to be deep voice. So I asked her her name, and she said, my name is Lola. Lola. And she talked like this. Okay. That seems a little weird, right? Okay. She has a very deep voice. That's what the dark brown voice means. Okay, Lola, L-O-L-A, Lola. All right, and we continue on. Well, I'm not the world's most physical guy, but when she squeezed me tight, she nearly broke my spine. Oh, my Lola, la 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 Lola. All right, so this one is pretty easy. So, I'm not the world's most physical guy, but when she squeezed me tight, she nearly broke my spine. Okay. All right, when you say, well, I'm not the world's most physical guy, but what you mean when you're saying that is you're not that not physical. So, in other words, not a physical guy, he means he's not very strong, doesn't exercise a lot, not very sporty. More of a music guy, like he probably is here. More of a arts sort of guy. Maybe likes writing, things like that. Not doesn't go out and play sports a lot. Not very physical. But so now when he says but, what he's meaning here is that he's not some little skinny little weak guy. I mean, he's okay. Even though he may not exercise a lot, he's okay. So that's why this next line is supposed to be kind of a surprise. When she squeezed me tight, squeeze, that's like a hug. When she squeezed me tight, she nearly broke my spine. Your spine, that's your backbone. So you know someone squeezes you tight, maybe hurts your back. Ow, ow. They squeeze you so tight. So that's what it's saying here. So you can see where the song is going already, probably, right? So Lola has a very deep voice. And now Lola, when she hugs him, it's very tight. Very tight. Nearly broke his spine. Okay, and we get to the next line. Well, I'm not dumb, but I can't understand why she walked like a woman but talked like a man. Oh, my Lola. All right, so now here they make it pretty clear what's happening. Although, I guess the guy singing still quite hasn't figured it out because he says, I don't understand, I can't understand. He says, I'm not dumb, but I can't understand. She walks like a woman, so she walks very dainty. But remember, she talks like a man, the dark brown voice. So I think you know what's going on here. So Lola is probably a transvestite. Now, one thing you need to understand is there's a difference between transvestite and transsexual, and we didn't really, back in these days in 1970, people didn't really pay attention to the difference, although there's a big difference, really. So a transvestite is someone that just likes to dress up as the opposite sex. It's usually men dressing up like women, but it could be the other way around. Women dressing up like men, that's fine. Could be that. Just happens to be mostly when a man dresses up like a woman. That's a transvestite. A transsexual is more of a man who believes they were born in the wrong body. So they feel like a woman. So they might even get operations to change who they are so that they can be a woman eventually. So I think what we're talking about here is probably a transvestite. They don't make it clear in the song. And it's partly because back then in 1970, we didn't really understand all of those differences. It was kind of a new thing socially. So to a lot of people back then, transvestite, transsexual, same. It's not at all. But back then, they kind of thought so. So they don't make it clear here whether Lola is transvestite or transsexual. I think from the way the song goes, Lola is a transvestite. So it's just a man dressing up as a woman. Okay. All right. So now you figured out what the song's about. So now we continue on. Well, we drank champagne and danced all night under electric candlelight. She picked me up and sat me on her knee and said, dear boy, won't you come home with me? Well, I'm not the world's most passionate guy, but when I looked in her eyes, well, I almost fell for my Lola. La 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 Lola. All right, so we have a lot there. That's kind of important. We drink champagne and danced all night. Okay. So that's not that big of a deal, except that you can see that he's kind of accepting her because he's staying with her all night. Okay. Under electric candlelight, that just means light. Okay. Just a way to make the words rhyme for the song. It's just an electric candlelight. It's just electric light. It's just under. They have lights. Okay. She picked me up and sat me on her knee. All right. Usually a woman's not going to do that. This is a big woman. Lola is putting him on her knee. A lot of times, especially back then, maybe not so much now because people are a little more careful. You don't want to upset a woman. But back then, the men were a little bit more forward. So you might put a woman on your knee. Well, this is a woman putting a guy on his knee, on her knee. Well, a woman. Again, Lola, we know really is a boy. Okay, that's what we figured out. So Lola's putting him on her knee. Okay, and it says, well, I'm not the world's most passionate guy, but when I looked in her eyes, I almost fell for my Lola. Okay, passionate means like loving, romantic, something like that. So he's not that passionate, but, so again, we're going to do something that is passionate because we're saying but. When I looked in her eyes, I almost fell for my Lola. So in other words, he's sitting on her knee, he looks in her eyes, and he's almost falling in love with her. Which is different, especially in 1970, because Lola's actually a man. And we don't know that this man that's doing this is actually gay. We don't think he is, because he's meeting up with her because he thinks it's a woman, so he's probably straight. But he looks in her eyes and falls in love. Okay. Now we get to the part where it gets a little bit interesting. Okay? I pushed her away, I walked to the door, fell to the floor, I got down on my knees. Then I looked at her and she at me. Well, that's the way I wanted to stay. I always wanted to be that way for my Lola. La 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 Lola. Okay, I think I sang that a little bit wrong. But listen to those words. I pushed her away, walked to the door, fell to the floor. I don't know why he fell to the floor. Probably he's hurrying up. He's being quick. Got down on my knees. Then I looked at her and she at me. So in other words, he gets a little scared here, right? He gets a little scared. He realizes, oh my God, Lola's a guy. And like I said, he's probably straight because he's looking to be with a girl. But this is why it's kind of a beautiful little song. It's a funny song, but it's actually kind of a beautiful, serious little song. Because he realizes, he looks at her, she at him. That's the way I always want it to be for my Lola. So he realizes that they do have a connection. Now, it's not saying that he wants to be his or her boyfriend. Doesn't say that. So we don't know exactly what that means. But we do know that he's okay with it. That's the way I always want it to be for my Lola. We know he's okay. Now, it doesn't mean that suddenly this straight guy is going to turn gay and be Lola's boyfriend. And no, that's not. We're not saying that. What the song is just saying, I mean, maybe that will happen. Who knows? But what the song is really just saying is that he's okay with it. That's the way I always want it to be for my Lola. And the next thing the next verse, we get even more of that sense. So we know that's kind of what he's saying here. I mean, it's a little confusing in that verse, but based on the next verse, we kind of know that that's what he's saying. So we get to the next verse, and it's, Girls will be boys and boys will be girls, so they're opposite. It's a mixed up, muddled up, shook up world except for Lola. Okay. That right there might be the most important line of the whole song. And if you listen to the song, if you go back and listen to the video, it's just kind of, we just go through the song and we just pass right through that. You maybe not even notice it. But think about what he's saying there. Girls will be boys, boys will be girls. Okay, that's kind of what Lola is, right? Because the Lola's girl's name, dressed like a girl. Lola's a boy. Okay, so it's a mixed up, muddled up, shook up world. So you've got what mixed up means is confused. Muddled up means it's just a different way to say mixed up, really. When you muddle something, we use that most with drinks. You're kind of smashing up some flavors to mix them all together. So it means the same thing. Shook up, kind of the same thing as well. You take something and you shake it to mix it up. So all of these means mixed up. So the boys are the girls are boys. Except for Lola. That is the most important line in the whole song. Because Lola is that, right? Lola's a boy dressed like a girl. Girls will be boys and boys will be girls. It's a mixed up, muddled up, shook up world, except for Lola. So what this is saying is that he kind of accepts her for what she is. She's presenting herself as a girl, and you will notice through the whole song, Lola is never referred to as he. It's always she or her. In fact, in the final verse here, we are actually going to get something where it says, where it kind of recognizes that Lola's a man. And the very last line. But it just says Lola's a man. Doesn't say he. Doesn't say him. So never in the whole song is Lola ever called he or him. Or his, anything like that. Like she picked me up and sat me on her knee. She picked me up, sat me on her knee. It's always she and her. So that's why that line is so important. It's a mixed up, muddled up, shook up world, except for Lola. That's why I say this is a very funny song, but there's a little bit of it here that's really actually serious. Because he's saying, it's okay. Lola, to him, Lola's a girl. He's okay with it. I mean, we don't know if he's actually, like I said, going to be like Lola's boyfriend because he's straight from all we know. But he can accept it. It's okay. And we finish up the song here. Well, I left home just a week before, and I'd never, ever kissed a woman before. But Lola smiled and took me by the hand and said, dear boy, I'm gonna make you a man. Well, I'm not the world's most masculine man, but I know what I am and I'm glad I'm a man, and so is Lola. Okay, so I've never kissed a woman before, but Lola smiled and took me by the hand and said, dear boy, I'm gonna make you a man. When someone says they're gonna make you a man, that usually means something about sex. Okay. But we don't really, that whole conversation just kind of ends there, so we don't really know that. It could just be about kissing, because he said, I've never kissed a woman before. We don't even know that they did kiss, right? We never talk about that. It's nowhere in the song. So again, it's not, sounds bad, right? Sounds dirty. But no, we don't know that anything happened. Okay? And then those last couple lines were, well, I'm not the world's most masculine man, but I know what I am, and I'm glad I'm a man, and so is Lola. Okay, now some people will interpret that in different ways. But most people interpret that the same way I think it's supposed to be interpreted. He says, I'm glad I'm a man, and so is Lola. In other words, Lola is also a man. So that's what I was telling you, that here in this last line of the whole song, it says Lola's a man. But some people don't think that's what it means, because it says, I'm glad I'm a man, and so is Lola. So what it might mean is that Lola is glad the person singing the song is a man. Because I guess Lola is probably a gay man because he's dressed up like a girl. Doesn't mean that. There are a lot of straight men that dress up as girls because they like it. But probably Lola, because of everything else we've heard throughout the song, putting him on his knee and things like that, Lola is probably not straight. So some people think that just means that Lola is glad that he's a man. I don't think that's what it means, though. Why? Because, I mean, Lola would know that the whole time. The person singing the song is not dressed up as something he's not. So there's no, there's nothing, there's no secrets there. There's no mystery. There's no reason for Lola to be glad that he's a man. Lola knew that all along. So what I think this means when it says, but I know what I am, and I'm glad I'm a man, and so is Lola, I think that means when it says, and so is Lola, it means that Lola is also a man. And most people do interpret it that way. Most people interpret it that way. I think that's probably the correct interpretation. So we end the song basically just saying, boom, Lola, in case you missed it, throughout the whole song, we have all of these words, and you maybe missed it. And back then in 1970, probably a lot of people did. Like I said, I didn't know what the song was about because this was a very controversial topic. Most people probably didn't understand. So what they're saying here, right at the end, yeah, Lola's a guy. Okay? So that's the song. It's really a fun song. It's kind of funny. It's kind of silly. And at the same time, there's a little bit of a serious note to it. Because the guy singing the song is never really upset that Lola is a guy. Briefly, we have that one verse there where I pushed her away and walked to the door, fell to the floor, I got down on my knees. Then I looked at her and she at me. Well, that's the way I always wanted to stay. I always wanted to be that way for my Lola. Okay, so we did get that. Pushed her away, walked to the door. Briefly. We get a little bit. But mostly, no. He's okay. So it's actually a very, in a weird sort of way, even though it's a really fun song, really silly song, it's telling about, I think that he actually really had this experience from what I understand, from the story I've heard about this song. So the writer and the main singer, which was probably Ray or Dave Davies, I think it was one of them. I want to say it was Dave. I didn't put that in my notes, but I think it's one of them. So it might have been Ray. So I apologize if I got that wrong. I think it was Dave Davies, but one of them wrote this because he had this experience. So it's a real experience. And so it's really, when you think about how things were back in 1970, it's actually really cool that they could be okay with this. There are a lot of people still today that aren't okay with this. And I'm not here to tell you whether or not it's okay. There are still some people now that don't think it's okay. So if you don't think it's okay, that's fine. That's fine. There are people who think things like this are okay. People that think things like this are not okay. But the reason I say it's cool and interesting and neat is because back at this time, again, remember this was 1970. This was a band that was primarily from the 1960s. Well, I say primarily. They've lasted a long time. In fact, I think they only just recently stopped performing. A lot of times I tell you when they've stopped. Again, I didn't take that down in my notes, so I'm not sure when they stopped. But I think it was very recently, in the 2000s. So they've been performing for almost 50 years. But they still are mostly remembered for their early years, so the 1960s. So this is a band from the 1960s, really, even though this song is 1970. This is a 1960s band. So we're talking about almost 60 years ago, not even 50. They formed in 1963. It's now 2024. That's 61 years ago. This is a 60-year-old band all the way back then, singing a song like this. That's pretty cool, regardless of what your politics are. Maybe you don't really think it's cool because you don't agree with it, but it's pretty cool that they would sing a song like this. All right, so this song is about really discovering yourself, and probably from both sides, really, right? Because you got Lola, it's really about Lola and being transvestite, and but a lot of it's really about the person singing it discovering themselves. Because they're going in there looking for a woman, and then they were like, oh, yeah, 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 yeah. So I pushed her away, walked to the door. But then at the end, we get, I know what I am. I'm glad I'm a man. So is Lola. Okay. Whatever. So by the time we get to the end of the song, he's okay. Whatever. So it's real. So the singer is also discovering themselves. So it's really a song of discovery. So it's a really cool song, especially from all the way back then, back in 1970. All right, so the Kinks. That's who does this song. I always recommend you listen to other songs by the bands that I do on here, or the performers I do. Now, the Kinks, they had a lot of good songs, but not so many like really big hits. I think their biggest hit, other than this song, I think their biggest hit was You Really Got Me. Girl, you really got me now. That's probably their other most famous song. So I recommend you listen to that one. You Really Got Me by the Kinks. That's their biggest hit, other than Lola. Lola's probably bigger than You Really Got Me, but You Really Got Me was also really big. So that's their other big hit. Go take a listen to that. They do have some other songs, so go ahead and listen to some of their other music as well. They do have a lot of other good songs, but when we're just talking about kind of their biggest songs, it's probably Lola and You Really Got Me. Those are probably their two biggest songs. So take a listen to You Really Got Me as well. Thank you for joining us, everyone. And please stay with us and tune back in next week for our next Musical Musings program, where I will bring to you another great song. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thank you.
Musical musings, musical